After 4 long years in silence, pain and forgotten prison cells, 24 men, fathers, brothers, sons, walked free. But why were they locked up in the first place? Why was one of them, Mazi Ekenedilichukwu Okuru, forced to bury his child from behind bars? What does this shocking court ruling in Ebonyi State really mean, and why now? While tears of joy flowed in the east, a storm was building in Abuja as Nnamdi Kanu, the face of Biafran resistance, stood in court once again. His lawyers say the case is baseless. His enemies say otherwise. And in Finland, another chapter unfolds. Simon Njoku Ekpa, once an athlete, now a political firebrand, faces legal fire while the media paints his past in sudden detail. Is this justice or a global setup? Add to that a deadly Fulani attack in Plateau State and Chinese cybercriminals exposed in Lagos, and you realize this isn't just a news story. This is a web of power, pain, and politics that could change Nigeria forever. So ask yourself, why now? What's really going on behind these headlines? And who stands to gain or fall? Don't blink. What you're about to see might just rewrite everything you thought you knew. A high court in Ebonyi State ordered the release and acquittal of 24 indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, members after 4 years in detention since May 2020. Barrister Ifeanyi Ejiofor, a key IPOB legal representative, led the legal team and shared updates on social media. Among those released was Mazi Okuru, who lost his son while in detention but was denied permission to attend the funeral. Barrister Ifeanyi Ejiofor described his ordeal as a painful reminder of the human cost of the Biafran struggle. Meanwhile, the Anambra State Governor Charles Chukwuma Soludo publicly urged President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to release Nnamdi Kanu, asserting that the IPOB leader may not be guilty of the charges against him. On July 18, 2025, Nnamdi Kanu appeared before the Federal High Court in Abuja for the adoption of final written addresses following the defense's no-case submission. The defense, led by Chief Kanu Agabi, argued the prosecution failed to prove its case. IPOB spokesperson Emma Powerful described Nnamdi Kanu's trial as politically motivated and reiterated the group's respect for the judiciary. The Federal High Court in Abuja barred Nigerian activist Omoyele Sowore and some of Nnamdi Kanu's lawyers from attending the July 18th session due to space constraints, raising questions about transparency and intent. Meanwhile, in Finland, a Finnish media outlet detailed how Simon Ekpa came to Finland through athletics, joined the military reserve, obtained citizenship, married, and started 2 companies. However, the timing of the publication raised suspicions. In Nigeria, Fulani herdsmen attack in Plateau State resulted in 27 deaths. Local youth groups accused the Nigerian military of complicity. The event was used to validate long-standing Biafra claims of government-backed violence. In Lagos State, 15 Chinese nationals were convicted of cybercrime and internet fraud by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, following recent convictions of 14 others for similar offenses. The problem in the heart of this story begins with a name that continues to polarize and inspire emotions across Nigeria and beyond. Nnamdi Kanu. His name and the organization he leads, the indigenous people of Biafra, have become a symbol for the pain, the resistance, and the aspirations of many people from the southeastern region of Nigeria. Yet, along with that symbolism comes suffering, arrests, crackdowns, and now, after years of legal struggle, a breakthrough in court. The second name that echoes in this unfolding saga is Simon Nyoku Ekpa, a controversial figure in Finland with deep ties to the Biafran struggle and the man many see as Nnamdi Kanu's ideological successor. The immediate issue that sparked national and international attention was the fate of 24 men, ordinary individuals whose lives were turned upside down when they were arrested and detained in May 2020 during the height of the Nigerian government's crackdown on the indigenous people of Biafra. These men were accused of being members or supporters of the group, and for 4 long years they waited behind bars. They were denied justice, denied the presumption of innocence, and most devastatingly, denied access to life itself. One of them, Mazi Ekenedilichukwu Okuru, suffered a tragedy that no man should ever endure while imprisoned. He lost his son, and he was not allowed to attend the funeral. His tears became a testimony to the depth of injustice. Yet, finally, a high court in Ebonyi State stood for what is right. It declared all 24 innocent and ordered their release. The ruling came as a thunderous moment of relief, one that pierced through years of suffering and injustice. Barrister Ifeanyi Ejiofor, a name known in the legal corridors of southeastern Nigeria and beyond, led the team that fought relentlessly for these men's freedom. Through every legal obstacle, he stayed firm. When news broke that the High Court had ordered their release, it was not just a victory for the men, it was a symbolic breakthrough for the larger Biafran movement. On his social media platforms, Barrister Ifeanyi Ejiofor shared not just the news, but the emotional weight that came with it. He called attention to the sacrifice and pain, especially pointing to the ordeal of Mazi Ekenedilichukwu Okuru, who now walks free but carries within him a wound that may never heal. This court decision did not happen in isolation. It happened in a country where justice is often slow, where political influence can overshadow truth, and where many believe that the struggle for Biafra has been unfairly painted as criminal. Governor Charles Chukwuma Soludo of Anambra State, a respected economist and politician, added his voice to the conversation. He stood before the press and openly appealed to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to do the right thing and release Nnamdi Kanu. According to Governor Charles Chukwuma Soludo, the continued detention of Nnamdi Kanu no longer serves the interest of justice or peace. He suggested that the charges against the indigenous people of Biafra leader lacked substance and that his prolonged incarceration risked further dividing the country. And so, as these 24 men stepped out of prison, there was another legal storm quietly brewing in the Federal High Court in Abuja. On the morning of July 18, 2025, all eyes turned once again to the capital city, where Nnamdi Kanu appeared before Justice Binta Nyako. The moment was critical. It was time for the adoption of final written addresses. This stage in the trial marked the culmination of years of arguments, delays, and legal battles. The defense had already filed a no-case submission, essentially arguing that the prosecution had failed to present sufficient evidence to justify a trial. Chief Kanu Agabi, a former Attorney General of Nigeria and the head of Nnamdi Kanu's defense team, made it clear in his address that the entire prosecution was flawed. He accused the federal government of using the judiciary to wage a political war against someone whose only crime, according to him, was asking for self-determination. Emma Chukwuma, powerful, the spokesperson of the indigenous people of Biafra, released a statement soon after, emphasizing that the entire trial was nothing more than a political vendetta. He said they still respected the judiciary but urged the international community to pay close attention to what was unfolding in Abuja. However, the courtroom session did not come without controversy. On that same day, the court authorities barred prominent Nigerian activist Omoyele Stephen Sowore and several of Nnamdi Kanu's lawyers from entering the courtroom. The reason given was space constraints, but many did not buy that explanation. Omoyele Stephen Sowore is not just an activist. He is a former presidential candidate and a man who has stood against injustice for years. His presence at Nnamdi Kanu's trial was symbolic, and being denied entry raised alarms about transparency and fairness. The question now became, what exactly is the government trying to hide? Was this really about space, or was this a subtle way of excluding important witnesses from observing a trial with national implications? As the legal drama unfolded in Nigeria, thousands of kilometers away in Finland, another twist emerged. A Finnish media outlet published a comprehensive article detailing the history of Simon Ekpa. According to the report, Simon Ekpa came to Finland years ago as an athlete. After his sporting career, he reportedly joined the Finnish military reserves, gained citizenship, married a Finnish woman named Marian Sakajärvi, and launched 2 companies. At first glance, the report seemed like a harmless biography, a piece of background on a man now making international headlines for his involvement with the Biafran movement. But the timing of the publication raised eyebrows. The report came just days after Simon Ekpa's court hearing in the Pihajoki District Court, where he faced charges ranging from tax evasion to acting as an unlicensed legal advisor under Finland's Lawyers Act. The court was still reviewing evidence and testimonies, and then this report emerged. Supporters of Simon Ekpa saw it as a calculated move, an attempt to shape public opinion against him while the court case was still ongoing. Others wondered if the Finnish government was beginning to build a public case that could justify harsher penalties. In Nigeria, the news of the 24 men being released was met with celebration, but it also reopened deep wounds. Across social media, people shared pictures of the released men reuniting with their families. Videos surfaced showing joyful scenes, tears, embraces, laughter, but also moments of deep silence as these men struggled to readjust to a world that had moved on without them for 4 long years. Many had lost jobs, loved ones, and even their homes. For some, the fight was no longer about politics. It was about healing. The ruling from the High Court in Ebonyi State triggered wider discussions about Nigeria's justice system. Legal analysts pointed out that if the court could declare them innocent after 4 years, then something had gone terribly wrong at the beginning. How did the police justify their detention for so long? Why were there no trials? And if these men could be released, how many more innocent people were still languishing in prison cells across Nigeria without a fair hearing? But the consequences of this unfolding story are not limited to the courtroom. On the same day, Nnamdi Kanu appeared in court, and Simon Ekpa's past was dissected in Finland. Another tragedy unfolded in Plateau State. Fulani herdsmen launched a violent attack that claimed 27 lives. The pattern of the attack, the reports of military inaction, and the swift destruction of villages all seemed too familiar. Youth leaders in the region quickly accused the Nigerian military of complicity. In their words, soldiers stationed nearby mysteriously withdrew hours before the attack. The government denied any wrongdoing, but the incident fed into an old and dangerous narrative that the Nigerian state turns a blind eye when certain groups commit violence, especially in regions perceived as sympathetic to the Biafran cause. This incident in Plateau State reignited calls for regional security and renewed the argument that groups like the Eastern Security Network were formed out of necessity, not rebellion. For the indigenous people of Biafra, the attack validated what they have been saying for years, that Nigeria is a country where some lives are considered expendable and where justice is reserved only for the powerful. Meanwhile, in Lagos State, another major news story broke. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission announced the conviction of 15 Chinese nationals for cybercrime and internet fraud. This came just weeks after 14 other Chinese nationals were convicted for similar crimes. These convictions were celebrated as victories for Nigerian law enforcement, but they also raised a troubling question. How did so many foreign nationals engage in organized crime within Nigeria's digital economy without being detected for so long? From the prison gates of Ebonyi State to the courtrooms of Abuja and the snowy legal corridors of Finland, the story of the Biafran struggle continues to evolve. There are clear signs of victory, men walking free, lawyers speaking boldly, and governors daring to challenge the presidency. But there are also shadows, acts of violence, allegations of military betrayal, and court decisions shrouded in secrecy. The consequences of these events are enormous. In the short term, the release of the 24 men brings joy, but it also puts pressure on the Nigerian government to reconsider its approach to the indigenous people of Biafra. In the long term, Simon Nyoku Ekpa's legal troubles in Finland may affect how the international community views the Biafran movement. If Finland convicts him, it may lend credibility to Nigeria's claims that the movement is being hijacked by criminal elements. If he is acquitted, it could strengthen the Biafran argument that they are victims of a global witch hunt. Are there solutions to this complex crisis? Possibly. Governor Charles Chukwuma Soludo's call for the release of Nnamdi Kanu presents a path toward dialogue. If President Bola Ahmed Tinubu listens, it could create space for political solutions rather than military ones. Justice Binta Nyako's court ruling, expected in the coming months, may also shift the momentum. A dismissal of the charges would be a monumental victory, while a conviction could push the country into deeper unrest. As for the 24 men now free, their future is uncertain. Some may choose to return quietly to their lives. Others may feel compelled to speak out, to tell their stories, and to join the movement more openly. Mazi Ekenedilichukwu Okuru, who lost his son, now stands as a living symbol of the emotional toll this struggle has taken. In Finland, the court's decision on Simon Nyoku Ekpa will echo far beyond Europe. It will affect how Nigerians, especially Biafrans, perceive the West. Is the West truly impartial, or is it bending to diplomatic pressure from Nigeria? This story is not yet over. In fact, it may just be entering its most important chapter. But for now, there is a glimmer of justice, a sliver of hope, and a reminder that in the fight for freedom, every voice, every court ruling, and every moment matters. As the news spread across southeastern Nigeria that the High Court in Ebonyi State had released 24 indigenous people of Biafra members after 4 years of painful and uncertain detention, the streets of towns like Abakaliki, Enugu, Onitsha, and Owerri slowly filled with soft murmurs, growing into shouts of celebration. Families reunited. Children who had never seen their fathers could finally hold their hands. Wives who had been holding on to hope with fading strength finally exhaled. The release was more than a legal decision. It was a healing balm over wounds that had festered for too long. However, the emotional cost of the delay remains heavy. Mazi Ekenedilichukwu Okuru, who walked out of prison only to face the reality that his only son had been buried without his presence, symbolizes the tragedy that many in this struggle endure. In an interview with a local radio station, his voice broke as he recounted how prison officials denied him access to a phone call, let alone a day to mourn his child. He described the moment he heard the news as a pain that made the walls of the prison seem like a coffin. And yet, when asked if he would still stand for Biafra, he said yes. His reason was simple. No child should grow up in a country where their father can be taken away for a cause, held for years, and abandoned. Barrister Ifeanyi Ejiofor, who has become a central figure in the legal representation of the indigenous people of Biafra, took the opportunity to call out the slow-moving judicial system that kept innocent men behind bars for 4 years without conclusive trials. He said the courts must learn from this moment and never again allow such delays to cost people their lives, their families, and their dignity. He also made it clear that while this victory was significant, the ultimate goal remained the same: freedom for Nnamdi Kanu and recognition of the right to self-determination for the Biafran people. In Abuja, while the streets did not erupt in celebration, there was an unmistakable tension in the air. The Federal High Court session on July 18, 2025, may have looked like any other legal hearing on the outside, but on the inside, something powerful was unfolding. Chief Kanu Agabi, known for his calm but commanding courtroom demeanor, stood and delivered what some legal commentators later called one of the most emotionally charged and technically brilliant final written submissions of his career. He pointed to inconsistencies in the government's case against Nnamdi Kanu, arguing that the charges were not only weak but politically driven. He referenced the extraordinary rendition of Nnamdi Kanu from Kenya, describing it as an international violation that tainted the entire prosecution. The presence of international observers was deliberately muted, possibly because the court had earlier restricted access. When Omoyele Stephen Sowore was denied entry, he stood outside the court building and spoke to journalists. He warned that the selective exclusion of observers could undermine the credibility of whatever verdict the court would deliver. Sowore, himself a target of government repression, said that the refusal to allow even peaceful activists to witness a trial of such magnitude signaled a dangerous trend in Nigeria's democratic journey. Meanwhile, Emma Chukwuma, powerful of the indigenous people of Biafra, issued another official press statement. In it, he accused the Nigerian government of trying to manage public perception rather than address the truth. He expressed worry that justice was being treated as a tool of state power rather than a pillar of democracy. Nevertheless, he said the indigenous people of Biafra remained committed to the rule of law and would await the court's decision, however long it took. Thousands of kilometers away in Finland, the unfolding court case against Simon Nyoku Ekpa began attracting increased attention from both Biafrans in the diaspora and Finnish citizens. The report published by the Finnish news outlet, which detailed Simon Nyoku Ekpa's journey from an athlete to a controversial political figure, did not just read like a biography, it read like a subtle warning. The media coverage triggered debates in Finland's parliament about how far freedom of speech should go when someone residing within their borders is accused of instigating violence in another country. Simon Nyoku Ekpa himself did not remain silent. In a video released on social media, he accused the Finnish state of using the media to try and convict him in the public arena before the court could make its decision. He emphasized that everything he had done was in the pursuit of human rights and justice for the Biafran people. He said he would not be intimidated and that the world would soon understand that his trial was politically motivated, just like that of Nnamdi Kanu. His legal team also began challenging the credibility of some of the evidence being used against him. For example, the allegation that he had operated as a legal advisor without a license was countered by claims that he had only offered political consultations, not legal services. The issue of tax evasion was presented as a misunderstanding linked to business registration timelines rather than an intentional act of fraud. But the stakes were growing higher. If convicted, Simon Njoku Ekpa could face imprisonment, fines, or even deportation, an outcome that would severely damage the morale of the Biafran movement abroad. Back in Nigeria, the political temperature continued to rise. Governor Charles Chukwuma Soludo's call for the release of Nnamdi Kanu was not without political risk. But more state governors from the southeastern region began to voice similar views quietly. They were cautious, fearing political retaliation, but many acknowledged privately that peace could not return to the region until Nnamdi Kanu was released, or at least given a transparent and fair trial. Ordinary Nigerians began to engage in heated debates on radio talk shows, in marketplaces, and across social media. For some, the court's decision to release the 24 men proved that the Nigerian government had overreached in its anti-Biafra campaign. This is the end of our news update. Please click the icon on the top right corner of your screen to watch my next video. You will enjoy it. I will see you again in my next update. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye for now.